So Karen, I see on my screen that the meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
The meeting is now live. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So I'll call the meeting to order. I'll begin with our land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and relations. May we honor those teachings. I also want to let members of the public, staff, presenters, guests, and members of the board of directors be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast via live stream to the Autonomy Conservation YouTube channel. If at any point a board member or presenter experiences some connectivity issues throughout the meeting, you may want to disable your video and continue on with the audio. That sometimes helps if there's a connection problem. And so this is the first time that we are doing this, so I suspect we may have the odd glitch, so just bear with us as we go through this. So we have the agenda, which has been circulated to colleagues. Is there any additions or objections to anything? I don't see any. I'll take a motion to approve the agenda then. From Sherry, seconded by Carl. All those in favor? It's carried. Is there any disclosure of conflict of interest on any matters on that agenda? Madam Clerk, none noted. And we will go then to our two delegations, or one delegation, two people. There we go. And so Mr. Hanchett and Smith are going to have 10 minutes. So, and then I'm going to open it up after that. So I don't know who's going to begin, but the floor is yours.
I'm going to begin, Mr. Mitchell, and just to give Mary a chance, she's given me the honor of going first, but I'd like you to cut me off if I go past 5 minutes. Just give me a little warning, please. So thanks for the opportunity to present to ORCA. I'm going to go through the presentation that was given to Selwyn Council earlier this week, but I'm not going to say the same thing that was said at Selwyn Council. So here we are, we're looking at page 1 of the presentation, and the first thing that's different is that it's not June the 15th, it's the 17th, and I'm not Mike Chappelle, I'm Guy Hanchett. And many of you don't know me at all, but I've worked with and met some of you during the 10 years that I've lived in the area, and I've presented to many of you as well while you're on council. For example, I have worked on the Peterborough Climate Change Action Plan, and I was present with Kim Zippel in the Water Working Group. And some of you may not know that ORCA owns a small sliver of land on Hague Point, known as Imagine the Marsh. I'm part of that group, and we watch over it. And I worked with ORCA when we repainted the viewing tower, worked with the unforgettable named Jesse James. And I've presented to Peterborough Council on several topics. I see several of the members of council here. Most notably, I presented several times in a valiant attempt to save our local PDI, but also behind the scenes, I've worked on a lot of other things as the chairman of For Our Grandchildren on other issues related to climate change. And I've presented a few times to Selwyn Council, so Selwyn councillors are on this call, know me as well. And as well, I'm a member of the Lakefield Trail Steward Association, along with other things. So if we could move to slide number 2. Some of you, here's a very, very quick history of Hague Point. Slide number 2 shows that it was used by Indigenous people as a stopping point above the rapids that begin at the Narrows, and it was Crown land until May 5th, 1832, sold to the village of Lakefield, and then trailers started showing up in about 1950s, and the trailer park has been run by a private for-profit company since about 1995. And can you move to slide number 3, please? And this shows a family of natives from Curve Lake camping on the campground in 1906. It's kind of interesting to see that, in my opinion. And we can imagine that perhaps the trailer park looked something like, the marshland looked something like the pictures on the left at that time. So can you move to slide number 4, please? After about 25 years under private management, the trailer park is a bit of a mess. And these pictures show the kind of mess that's there. The picture on the right shows the plumbing that's deteriorating. The picture on the left shows some of the material that's kept there during the winter. And can you move to the next slide, please? Slide number 5. And here's some more pictures of the state of the trailer park today. It's not very picturesque. I have to say, we didn't pick the most beautiful pictures. We wanted to show you the kinds of things that are some of the results of having run it by a private organization. Slide 6, please. Slide 6 points out that this is not really a campground, it's a trailer park. And the problems that this trailer park have are largely caused by the fact that most of the trailers stay year-round. And in addition, there's an inadequate buffer from the water and from the trail, especially the wetland on the west side. And you can kind of see how close it comes to the wetland on the west side in that picture that's showing here. Some trailers are connected to a deteriorating sewage system, which it turns out is just upstream from Lakefield's water intake system and just upstream from the Lakefield public beach. And I want to say that trail users do not feel comfortable when the overflow area on the west side of the park is used. The people who are using those trailer sites are friendly enough, but you still feel like you're passing through someone else's kitchen and interrupting their breakfast. And the last point of why it's not really suitable is that there are docks for motorboats in the wetland, which puts the wildlife that lives in the provincially significant wetland at risk. Can you move to slide number 7, please? So I just wanted to really show you the map here, not the words on the left-hand side. And the map shows an overview of the Lakefield of Hague Point. And I can't show you with my mouse. I was hoping to do that, but you can see that in the middle there, someone's pointing to it. There you go. Someone's moving a mouse just nicely, perfect. So there you can see flowing north. There's Rays Creek that flows past the trailer park, through the marshland, up into Lake Cachewanuka, around the point, oh, someone's doing a great job, and turns into the Otonabee River. And on the right-hand side, just about where
You're at 5 minutes. I'm just.
Oh, well, Mary, can I have 2 more minutes?
One more.
One more, okay. Okay, so you can see the things. The water inlet is just that white roof over there on the right-hand side. So what we would like to say is, can you move to the next slide, please? Is that all but one of the consultation over the last 50 years has recommended removing the trailer park, including the letter that Mary is going to talk to in a couple of minutes. And our preference remains that the land be transitioned back to a more sustainable use that benefits more people. But we are pleased that Selwyn has expressed a preference for that Orca be involved. Your mandate would indicate to us that all 4 pillars of sustainability, human, social, economic, environmental, will be considered. But if the point is to still be used for trailers, we would like to see Orca transition it to run like Beavermead. We'd like to see trailers removed over the winter. We'd like to see a smaller footprint and a greater buffer from the water, and especially the wetland, and no permanent sewer hookups, and fewer seasonal sites, and a launch facility for canoes and kayaks and paddle boats that would replace the existing docks. And we have several dreams on slide number 9, I think, but we don't need to go into those. They're all the kind of dreams that everybody has. But slide number 10 represents a visit that Dorothy Taylor, elder and water walker and knowledge keeper from Curved Lake, had from a magical visit here in April. She walked around, she went around in her wheelchair to the various places and listened to what the land and the trees and the water had to say. And she heard the words that you see printed here and that are in the presentation that you have available to you. She knows that we can't turn time back, but she asks us in the end to listen to your own heart, hear and feel these messages from the original spirits of the land. And I ask you to do likewise. Thank you. Over to you, Mary.
Okay, thanks, Guy, and thank you everyone on the board and staff for giving us this opportunity. As you know, the Township of Selwyn has been going through a public consultation process with regards to the future of this so-called campground, and as Guy has said, it's really truly a trailer park. The community's become very engaged. The people who have had their trailers there for generations, some of them are really engaged. And so are the people in the community who during COVID are out walking and exploring in their own backyard. And I have to say, you know, I'm thankful for Orca properties that I was able to walk on during this pandemic. People need to exercise, they need to be in nature. What's happened in the community is there have been folks who've, there's been a group come together called Friends of Lakefield Park, and other individuals in the community who've expressed their concerns about the environmental impact that is very obvious when you see the pictures, but also when you hear about some of the practices of the operator of the park. And so what we're seeing and hearing now is the recommendation from the consulting firm that that Orca be asked to be a manager of the park and of this property. And, you know, really, I know personally that Orca has been an excellent partner with the municipality over the years, assisting with shoreline naturalization in that area, managing the Imagine the Marsh property, and overseeing the drinking water source protection zone there. But I think it will take a lot of time and engagement with the community to be satisfying the concerns that are there. And because there was no model or management plan put forward during this consultation, the community had a lot of questions. So I did a little research for myself. On Saturday, I went to Beavermead Park, and my daughter and I cycled into the campground. It looks like a park. I know they came in on Friday, tomorrow, the campers. But right now, Beavermead Campground looks like a park, feels like a park, and it is a park because it's accessible. One can ride their bike through, one can walk through. Somebody was having a picnic on a picnic table. So what our community in Lakefield doesn't have access to is this beautiful piece of land for 12 months of the year. And what I see at Beavermead, for 8 months of the year, the community can enjoy. But even the impact of the kind of camping that happens there is not the density, it's not the high impact that we see at the Lakefield campground right now. So on that note, I just want to say that we know that the Township of Selwyn is still hasn't made a final decision, is working their way through this with the consultants, but I'm confident that if Orca is the choice to be the manager, that you will take into consideration the environmental concerns that are certainly being quite eloquently expressed by many people in the community who have a lot of expertise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you, Guy. And you got it pretty close, 10:48, so thank you. Dan, did you want to add anything before I open it up?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Okay, not Joe. You're muted, Joe.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Andy, and welcome to Mary and Guy. It was nice to hear that presentation. I always admire citizens when they feel passionately about an issue and they become actively involved in it. And whether I agree with them or not is not the point. I admire that passion and the energy. I think, as you hopefully can understand, for Orca to prepare some sort of a quote, to prepare a business case, to make a plan to run that park, is going to be, it's a big job. It takes a lot of time. It takes staff a lot of time. And so my feeling would be there's no point in going down that road until such time as Selwyn Council decides what they want to do with it. And so that's why at this point in time, I don't see, other than Orca standing on the sidelines watching and waiting, I don't see that we really can do very much more. There's decisions got to be made before, unless and until those decisions are made, before Orca may become involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody else? Okay, I don't see anybody, but I want to echo Joe's comments. Thank you very much, Mary and Guy, for making the presentation. We appreciate it, and Guy, we have seen you a number of times for sure, as you're saying, and of course, Mary is no stranger to us all. So thank you both very, very much. We appreciate it. And colleagues, I'll take a motion to receive that presentation. Gary, seconded by Kim. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, we'll now go to the minutes. The minutes of May the 20th were circulated. Does anybody have any questions or inquiries about that? Not seeing any. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Mike, seconded by Joe. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, any business arising from the minutes? Carl, did you have your hand up for?
No, I was putting my hand up in advance, I guess.
Okay, and so, well, that is a good segue to our next report, our draft financial statements. And the chair of the Audit Committee, I believe, is going to make a presentation. That would be
Okay.
Carl.
Thank you, members of the board and staff. In your package, there's a cover letter of the highlights of the financial statement. And thanks to Audit Committee Ryan Huntley and Kim Zippel, we met last Wednesday evening, June the 9th, for quite a lengthy, detailed review of the financials. The Audit Committee is in her capacity as independent and are basically a liaison between the auditor and management. And I must say, we are after going through the details, we're satisfied that the detailed tests by the auditor, Pat Garland Hickey, are its true record for the role as of our governance oversight. The operational oversight of this organization is completely in the hands of management, and but we're satisfied with the governance oversight relative to financials. I think that's about it. Unless there's any questions, I may be able to answer them or ask Dan to help out or Pat help out if there's any questions. But you'll see some highlights there. The numbers are generally quite positive for the year. I think the main thing that caused that positive thing was an unanticipated $100,000 grant from the federal government for enabling accessibility through the Accessibility Fund to Employment and Social Development Canada to support the inclusion of accessibility features at the new Warsaw Caves Gatehouse. That wasn't part of a budget last year, so that was helped, and the 50,000 that we authorized earlier to move out of reserves in case we needed it during COVID didn't need to be used. So I think that's primarily the highlights, but certainly if anyone has any questions, Pat is on the line as well, or Dan or Denise can help us.
Thank you, Carl. Colleagues, questions, observations? Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thanks to the Audit Committee for going through this. I paid particular attention to this report because I will be on the Audit Committee in 2022. So this shows me what I'm in for. But I really think that we need to recognize and acknowledge and thank staff for bringing an audit in with a 1%, within 1% of revenue and expenditures in 2020. I was shocked to see that in all the years that where I wouldn't have thought that was possible. 2020 was the one, and you still to come in within 1%, I think is a phenomenal achievement. And I think we really need to thank staff for doing that, because that's who is responsible for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Other comments? See any? I have a question to you, Carl. Normally, and that doesn't mean that that's the way it's always done, but normally when I've been asked to approve draft financial statements, I usually have the auditor's opinion. And I know we don't have an auditor's opinion here. So that the opinion, whether it's everything's okay, whether it's a clean audit or not.
Yep.
And I
We,
just,
pardon me for interrupting. We as a committee did receive a number of letters, independence and so on. And perhaps Pat, could you comment further on that question?
Yes, I can. We cannot issue our auditor's report until the financial statements have been approved by the board. So it's a sequence. So we're in the process of doing the audit right now. My discussions with the audit committee is, at this point, we're looking at doing the report as you've always seen it on it, with no denial of opinions, with an honest opinion on it. But you do not get the independent auditor's report until A, the financial statements are approved, and B, the audit is completed. We can't complete the audit until they've been approved, so it's kind of a catch-22. So actually, if you approve these statements tonight, I will be in finishing up the audit before the end of the month. So you'll have your auditor's report at the end of the month. But if you look at the engagement letter, it gives you an indication of the report that's going to go on this.
thank you.
Just
Thank you.
a further point I should make. During our meeting, Pat was heard to say that she was very happy with the level of detail from management for putting together the reports that she's done so far. So
Thanks, Carl. Any other comments? Okay, I will entertain actually three: one to receive, one to approve, and that staff be authorized to do all things necessary. Moved by Sherry, seconded by Ryan. All those in favor? I said aye, folks. There you go. Thank you. That's approved. Thank you again, as Joe said, to the audit committee and to our auditor and to management for all the work they've done on this. So thank you very much, everybody. Okay, we'll go on to the next report, which is amendments to the governance bylaws. Dan, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you. When we met in March, at a March regular meeting, we brought in some amendments to the bylaws to bring the bylaws in conformance with some recently proclaimed provisions of the legislation. The board had a conversation around the chair and vice chair appointments, and around whether or not, how we would seek a minister's exemption if we either wanted to appoint the chair, vice chair for a 2-year term rather than consecutive 1-year terms, or whether we wanted to appoint them for more than 2 years, or whether we wanted to appoint either one of them without the proper rotation amongst municipalities. And one of the direction was given to me to connect with the ministry to see if, in fact, we could get a kind of a standing amendment where, on a go-forward basis, our chair and vice chairs were appointed for 2-year terms rather than annual terms and stuff like that. So I did pursue that. It took some time to get an answer. You see the essence of the answer in the board report. They don't contemplate that the minister would give us a standing exemption. But if we came in on any one particular year with a request to make a 2-year appointment, the minister would consider that, but not a standing exemption, which would result in, let's say, amendments to the bylaws. And just to be clear, that would be to a pattern that's similar to the appointment of wardens and deputy wardens at the county. So based on that understanding, we've come back with a proposal to amend the bylaws around appointments of chairs and vice chairs, and a proposal to make an amendment to the appointment of a nominating committee. And what I'm suggesting is that we look at the language in the nominating committee. For A and well, it should be A and B is the same. But what one of the tasks of the nominating committee is to contemplate the question of whether to seek a minister's exemption. And if so, to make a recommendation to the board that that be pursued. And then I suggest some amended timelines there. So I think that's, this is the return of a previous discussion. Hopefully it covers the needs now, but I'll take any questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions on those slight alterations? Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Dan. Dan, are you aware in your conversations with other authorities in Ontario, are other authorities looking at asking for exemptions to this to allow a change of terms and very similar to what this board has been considering?
Yes. So if you recall, the amendments to the act came into effect on February 2nd. We had our annual meeting in January and our appointments were made, and they stand until next time we have to make new appointments. There are many other CAs that did not get their annual appointments in before the amendment took effect. So they virtually all of them sought minister's exemption to either extend the term of a long-standing chair or to ask for a 2-year term for planning for continuity. And I was in a call on Tuesday and we did a round table. I can say about I don't have the exact count, but let's say it's 10 to 12 CAs that made requests. Only about half of them got exemptions granted. And there doesn't seem to be a rhyme or reason where Conservation Authority A asked for an extension of a term and didn't get it, but Conservation Authority B asked for the same thing and got it. So a very, I can say a very subjective reaction versus a, well, lack of a better term, principled reaction, but a very subjective reaction to what was being presented. And I think it's probably all on the strength of the rationale being presented.
Thank you for that, Dan.
Any other questions, colleagues, on those amendments? Not seeing any, I'll take a motion to approve. Diane, thank you. And seconded by Joe. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, the next item is the proposed response to the proposed regulations under the Conservation Act. So Dan has prepared something in the order of 6 pages, highlighting some of the more significant concerns. So Dan, do you want to speak to that?
Thank you. So I will tell you it was a bit of a struggle for me to kind of get through and pull out what should be the salient points of an argument here. I thought it was important that the minister know that much of what we own by way of capital infrastructure today is really the legacy of a pretty freewheeling provincial granting programs at one time in history. But anyways, if we go to the very last part of the proposed letter, really down to 4 key points. I'm going to make the argument that need to better address the government's commitment to conserving natural resources. That's a stated objective for conservation authorities in their environmental plan. And that in part picks up on the comments made at our last board meeting. Joe made the observation that there's very little here around natural heritage conservation. So I was trying to circle back on that theme and connect it back to a government commitment. I think there's a real risk that depending on where they draw the line about what's mandatory and not mandatory, we could see a lot of programs. We could see a lot of things that are tied to capital assets, basically orphaned, no money to abandon or physically decommission them. And they would just become abandoned structures till such time as they become such liabilities, everyone agrees to remove them. So I wanted to point out that fairly arbitrary decisions on where you divide the line on dams and lands could have a effect of creating orphan legacies. I also want to point out that there is no timeline specified for many of the new requirements, such as a water-based resource management strategy, certain policy documents and management plans for our lands. If those are all expected to be in place by day one after the regs are passed, that's unachievable. There needs to be a transition phase, especially given some of these things. There's no clarity on exactly what it needs to be done to meet a regulatory requirement. And finally, there is some unfunded costs that come with those mandatory things. And that cost can be mitigated in part by stretching out the timelines for implementation. So a little bit of money every year can get us there versus needing a big amount of money in year 1 and 2. So, so the whole letter kind of gets us down to 4 bullet points, which I think is a summary and my recommendation on what we should articulate to the government. But I'd certainly be pleased to take any suggested edits or removals or inclusions here. And Mr. Chair, I don't know how I mean, in the past, we would draft these letters, we circulate it, and people would either provide a comment accept or endorsing it or suggested reframing of something. I don't know. We can do that here in the next few moments, or we could do that over the next few days, but maybe I'll turn it back to you for conversation.
Yeah, let's see what folks have to say. I think generally what we're looking for is that members, the board members, concur with the general thrust of what you said. If you have to do a little bit of wordsmithing just to make it flow a little bit easier or whatever, I think what we're really looking for isn't wordsmithing, but really that those key points that you made are the ones that we want to make. Several conservation authorities are making comments. At Conservation Ontario, I think it's a 60-page submission. That's been it's just about finalized, because they're right down to the minutiae, because a lot of what's in these regulations is about how we're going to operate on a day-to-day basis. And so there's a lot of detailed information. But let me just ask you a question, Dan, because it is one of the issues, and I'm sure if you've had a chance to read it, you get it. So it's trying to delineate activities in respect of land, which is mandatory and not mandatory. So and it really almost and Dan uses a phrase. I thought he turned a good phrase in his letter. If you have land that you own and it's not been disturbed, or it's not it does not host people, it's a mandatory. The management of that land is mandatory. If, on the other hand, the land does host people, so an example would be that I'm familiar with, and others would have others, but Selwyn Beach is an example, then the maintenance of that is a non-mandatory service. Am I getting that sort of right, Dan?
That's the proposal in the proposed regulations. The criteria to determine whether it's mandatory or not mandatory is how the land is being used versus yes, that's the way it is. There's a continuum out there, and the continuum actually is, can be found and rooted in the Ontario park system as an example. On one end, you have a wilderness park, and then at another end, you have a recreational park. And in a wilderness park, it implies nothing goes on, but it's not true. There are fly-in fishing operations. You can canoe through there. You can camp in the wilderness parks. At a recreation thing, it's quite a developed campground, maybe similar to Beavermead, for instance. And they're trying to separate based on how the land is used versus a different model, which I'm suggesting is owning the land costs come with owning the land. Those should be mandatory. The services and amenities on the land can be treated separately. In conservation authority world, some conservation authorities own golf courses and ski hills. To me, that's a commercial operation, probably not consistent with the intent of conservation. But I think other amenities like trails in a natural setting, the lands definitely should be mandatory. You can argue whether the trails is an amenity that should be paid for is not mandatory. So we're trying, anyways. Yeah, you've captured it correctly, Andy. I'm hopefully not confusing it.
And that's a big concern for a lot of conservation authorities. As Dan says, the ones that are clearly commercial, if they become non-mandatory services, the revenue stream is maintaining them for the most part. But you get something like a walking trail where you're not charging any kind of fee for it, or Selwyn Beach where you're not charging a fee, and they become non-mandatory. That means as municipalities, we would not have to support through the levy of maintaining that, and that means that you don't really have a revenue source to maintain something like that. Excuse me, I'm just going to close my window. So that's an issue. The other thing I wanted to mention, Dan didn't touch it on here, but for us as municipal councillors, it's really important. So the timeline on this is that this takes effect in 2023. So we're halfway through 2021 and we don't have all the regs yet. There is 2 more sets of regs at a minimum coming. There's phase 2, which will primarily deal with the mandatory levy or the minimum levy, which is the administrative overhead that you're allowed to include in the mandatory levy, as opposed to something tied to a specific program. But we also need all the Section 28 regs that we don't have yet as well. So I say all that because we need, by the end of this year, to be able to have a delineation between what is our mandatory and our non-mandatory. And then we're expected to negotiate the MOUs with the individual townships. And really, you need to do that before your budget process for 2023 kicks in. So for the city, it's probably September or October that you're going to be wanting to have some numbers, maybe even earlier. So we're under a really tight timeline here to do things. Plus, as Dan pointed out, there are a number of new things that we're going to be required to do that we haven't done before, and they all drive costs. So we're going to have to do a watershed management plan. We're going to have to do a plan for each one of our holdings. Each one of our land holdings requires a management plan. We need to have a land policy that we need to develop. We need to strike and put into place a advisory committee. So there's a whole set of actions of things that we're required to do that all have to happen simultaneously. One of the things, and I should say this to colleagues, and that you need to be aware of this, we are so fortunate to have Dan. He has actually anticipated many of these changes in advance, including about how he's organized us. He's anticipated what would be mandatory, not mandatory. He's structured the budgets that way. He's done a tremendous amount of work to put us well ahead. You may recall we actually do have management plans on our properties, or on most of our properties. Many of the others don't have that. So we're very, very fortunate to have had Dan getting through this. But as councillors, we're going to be in our other roles, in our municipal roles, having to come to negotiations for what we are willing to include in non-mandatory services that we're willing to fund through MOUs. It's really, really a lot of stuff coming down. Anybody have any questions? No? Okay. Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dan, to yourself and the team that did this analysis. As Andy said, it is really anticipatory, and I would be happy to have this letter with its recommendations going forward and comfortable approving that this evening. And as a comment, it seems like the management of conservation lands and the natural hazards as well, that these are areas where it's non-mandatory for whether it's water control structure or whether it's a trail or a recreational facility, where we're going to have liability issues. When you talk about stranded assets, to me that raises alarm bells right away about safety of the use of our properties, control structures within our municipalities. And I don't know if the province has addressed at all the liability issues with stranding these assets. Has that been part of the conversation?
I don't think so. The minister is keen on providing municipalities with greater say on the amount of money that comes from a municipality's Port of Conservation Authority. He's trying to do that by saying, listen, if everything we do, only part of it is mandatory, you get no say, and the rest of this stuff is optional or non-mandatory, you do get a say. And you can either sign a service arrangement to do plan review or the risk management official function or whatever it is, or you can agree to accept a levy for some other things that the board may think is okay. So the minister is driven with trying to provide municipalities with a greater say in how much money comes out of a municipality and goes to a conservation authority. And in doing that, certain things will be unfunded, and some of those things will, and unfunded means unfunded to either operate and maintain or unfunded to decommission. And that's the risk that's being left on our laps. And trying to say that in this letter, and I could probably say it even stronger, but it's not in the ministry's eyes. It's not in their mind right now, because their mind is being driven by giving choice to the municipalities. Not a bad objective. I'm not critical of the objective. It's just there's a collateral damage to us. And I don't think it's been articulated well enough or understood well enough. So.
Oh, thank you very much for that.
And if I could also say, this history repeats itself here. In the late 90s, the province got out of big funds or big grants and left the cost to CAs, but the CAs still had levying abilities. Now we're going through the same sort of thing, but we're taking away the levying abilities. We at Hope Mill, for instance, the Hope Mill campground, half of the buildings are still there. That's a legacy from closing that campground almost 20 years ago, when it was funded previously by provincial grants. So it takes time to get through these things on any kind of small scale budget. So this will define our risks and our costs going forward, but it restricts us from getting money to be able to effectively manage those. Maybe it's cheaper to pay insurance and deal with claims than it is to mitigate those. I don't know.
Yeah, that would not be my approach, but.
Oh, I know, and that's a sarcastic response, but sometimes that's how I feel about what's going on.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dan.
Joe?
Thank you, Andy. Dan, how much use or benefit will our asset management plan be to some of this work that you must undertake?
So, good question. Thank you. The staff have been updating all of that literally in the last weeks or so. Denise and I met on Tuesday to review the current stuff. I think it'll do two things. We haven't put the lens of mandatory versus mandatory on it, but it will certainly define for us the kind of capital assets we have that will support the mandatory programs. And it'll define for us the capital assets we need to continue with the non-mandatory programs. And through that, we can do a calculation about what the replacement costs are for the next 10 years, and or look at the current amortization costs, which don't really reflect the replacement cost. But we can actually probably generate for the next budget cycle, generate a reasonable value to say when we're seeking approval or support to receive a levy for capital assets. We can generate a number to say over 10 years we need $1 million or 100,000 a year, and we look for and we can describe that as either sustaining certain non-mandatory programs or decommissioning certain non-mandatory things. So we can calculate that. But the question I will not argue, but I will advocate we put to our member municipalities is basically these are non-mandatory things. To sustain them and operate them cost X, to decommission them and wind them down to cost Y. Yet you have to pick between X and Y. You can't. We have to get the argument on the table that they have to pick one of two pathways. But the reality is, with the way the legislation is set up, they can pick the third pathway is to say no to neither of A or B. So we can quantify it. The asset management plan will help us do that. And we're getting in good shape on that to do that. So, but it's gonna be tough math.
Carl, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Thanks, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Dan, very much for your level of detail on this letter. I like the language. I like the tone. To be able to get our message across in a non-scolding fashion is a unique trait that we appreciate, and I'm sure it's will be received well, hopefully by the province and get read. So I'm quite supportive of moving forward with it. So thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Does anybody else have any other comments? Okay, then would somebody be willing to make a motion that Dan is authorized to submit the letter? Carlos willing to move, Diane's willing to second. All those in favor? Carry. Okay, thank you, Carl. We'll now go on to our next report, which is a contract award at Hope Mill.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. We tendered for some repairs to the retaining walls. Only received one bid from Drain Brothers. The bid is below budget. We've worked with Drain Brothers in the past, and we're confident in their ability to do the work. Pretty simple work, and we're seeking approval to award a contract in the amount of just over $47,000 plus HST.
Questions, colleagues? Sherry, move it.
I'm moving it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Joe is seconding it. Okay. No questions. All in favor, please raise your hands. That is carried. Thank you. So now we'll go to reports for information. The first one is your CAO, Secretary Treasurer Monthly Activity Report. Anything that you want to highlight in there, Dan?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions about its content? I don't see any, so I'll take a motion to receive that CAO Secretary's report. Moved by Carl, seconded by Ryan. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, we have our correspondence and media coverage. I'll just point out that in the correspondence was a letter from one of our guests that he had sent previously. And so that's in the packet of correspondence. So any questions about any of the correspondence and media? Not seeing any. Can we have a motion to receive both of those things? From Gary and from Diane, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you, colleagues. Our open forum, does anybody want to bring up anything else? No? Okay. So now we are going to move. Can I have a motion to move into closed?
And I think
from somebody. So, hold on just a second. Yes?
sorry, in a moment here, we're just going to let Karen confirm that we're no longer live streaming. And then,
We have to make the motion to go into close
yes,
in open.
yes,
That's what we're
yes.
going to do. And then we're just going to wait until we have confirmation that we are no longer live streaming. So the motion to
Could
go
we
into
also-
close,
Can we then also have just like a 2-minute quick bio break?
yes, we can do that too. That would
Thank
be
you.
actually a good idea while they make the change. So Diane and Kim move and second that we go into closed. All those in favor? Okay, we're now